Hello and welcome to the Crystal Palace podcast. I'm Alfonso Greenbrook, and in today's podcast I'll be looking over the game against Bournemouth by bringing you my match review, player rankings and my man of the match. As well as this, I'm also going to bring you interviews with Julian Speroni, Max Meyer and Luke Dwyer after the game. So let's begin. The game that set itself against a backdrop of celebration for both Julian Speroni and Jefferson Puncheon, as well as the close of the 2018-19 season, delivered an 8-goal thriller that saw Crystal Palace run riot into the Selhurst turf, defeating a visiting Bournemouth. After a slow opening 20 minutes, the clash burst into life through Michy Batshuayi, and the goals didn't dry up from then on. The first chance appeared to fall to Palace, as Max Meyer played a fine ball into the path of Batshuayi, who found himself one-on-one with the goalkeeper Matt Travers. His effort was well saved as the assistant referee raised his flag. Equally close, Luka Milivojevic was then denied by the woodwork rather than the laws of the game, as he struck a fierce bending effort from 25 yards, which shook the post and flew out of play. Wearing a newly unveiled 2019-20 home shirt, the Eagles looked sharp in their attire as well as their skill, and Wilfried Zaha unsettled the visiting Cherries as he danced his way into their box before ultimately falling victim to a crowd of legs at close quarters. Palace's close chances finally yielded success after 23 minutes, when Batshuayi, this time onside, strongly held off the tight marking of Steve Cook to acrobatically turn home a deflected Zaha cross from 5 yards out. With his effort, the sun struck Selhurst and the already energised crowd in SE25 burst into life, with a positive home win seemingly a likely reward for their following this season. Lifted by the bulging of the net, Palace looked determined to double their advantage, and both Max Meyer and Milivojevic sought to put their side further ahead with off-target efforts. Shortly afterwards, their resolve paid off. Again it was Batshuayi, again it was from close quarters, and again it was emphatically received by the onlooking 25,000. With Aaron Wan-Bissaka exhibiting his experience as a former winger down the right flank, the Belgian forward only had to stretch his stuck-out leg to prod home a well-whipped cross, which fizzed low into the Cherries' box. 2 soon became 3 minutes later as the Eagles launched Selhurst Park into an end-of-season party via the misfortunes of Jack Simpson. Zaha charged head down towards Travers and unleashed a venomous shot at the teenage goalkeeper. Cannoning off his keeper's chest with pace, the on-rushing Simpson was unfortunately placed and ended up bouncing the ball off his shin into his own net. Retaliating against what appeared primed to turn into a homeside riot, Jefferson Lerma took control of his team's afternoon and launched a stunning long-distance effort into Vicente Gaeta's direction, which sailed into Palace's net to go down as the 4th goal of the half. It was a strike worthy of the celebration, however the Cherries and their fans remained conservative in their excitement given the deficit they faced. Looking to open the second half as they played through the first, Andros Townsend cracked a promising shot at goal, however Travers was equal to his attempt and made it very well to deny the winger. James McCarthy was next to test his luck, but also prevented from scoring by Travers, who blocked his close-range shot instinctively. But, against the run of play, it was the visitors who scored next. Jordon was the man who found the net when, on the edge of the box, he took a composed touch before angling an effort between Gaeta and his post to give Bournemouth hopes of a comeback. The hopes were dashed before they could fully develop, however, by some fine link-up play between Zaha and Puncheon van Aanholt, as the former threaded the latter in before watching him slot home coolly under pressure. Meyer was next to Warley travelling support with a swiftly caught effort from just outside the box, which crept whispers past the keeper's left post. The action wasn't confined to Travers' end of the pitch though, as Gaeta was forced into being alert when he stood firmly as an obstacle between the substitute Mossett and Glory. He couldn't keep Bournemouth out any further seconds later, as Josh King netted from close range after Cliff Mepham nodded into space from a corner. The Cherry celebrations were later proved to be in vain when Townsend bagged Palace's 5th goal of the game, after a sublime drive from Zaha, who skipped past Nathaniel Keimer and Lerma, running 40 yards to selflessly switch to his teammate on the wing, who made no mistake of striking home. With the game well won, Roy Hodgson offered more cause for celebration by handing a first-team debut to Luke Dwyer, the academy graduate coming in late in the place of Townsend after a difficult time battling with injury. At the close of a season full of its usual highs and lows of the Premier League and Crystal Palace, the Eagles ended their campaign on an incontestable high, with the game very much worthy of celebration. So I'm now going to move on to my player ratings, but before I start, don't forget you can follow us on both Twitter and Facebook at Crystal Palace for all the latest Palace news. So if you are someone like myself who does like to follow a vast array of Palace accounts on both Twitter and Facebook, then of course do follow us on our respective accounts. Now, like I've said there in that little introduction, we do update that with the latest news. So whether that be just general news about the club, whether that be about the academy, the ladies team, the stadium develops, or even certainly different quotes from players and things like that. If you do want to keep up to date with all that sort of latest news, then of course do follow us. And alongside that, and especially sort of coming up to the summer transfer window now, if you do want a place to get all the latest transfer news, and I would say we're quite good at actually, as soon as an article goes out, we put it on Twitter, get you guys' opinion, put it out there. So if you are someone who wants a place to get all the latest news, and obviously especially with the transfer news, with all of the ingoings and outgoings, which of course we're going to see over the next few months or so, of course follow us on there. And like I said already, alongside just the general news and the transfer news, we also post interviews on there. So if you are someone who, wants to hear what Roy Hodgson said after the game, want to hear what players said after the game, and certainly there were a few interesting comments, from Roy Hodgson regarding people like Batshuayi after the game. So if you do want to obviously catch up on these quotes and hear what he had to say, then of course do follow us on both our accounts at Crystal Palace. Now, alongside that, we also post our opinion note after the game. Now, I personally, obviously, there was a main guy who runs a Twitter account. He obviously gives his instant match reaction after the games. So if you do want another account to go over and follow, to get that instant match reaction, as well as sort of reaction before games happen, looking at the press conferences, as well as just general news about the club, reacting to stories like that. If you do want another place to get your own opinion, then of course the guys over there do a fantastic job. So of course do follow the account there. Now, another great place to share your an opinion is in the YouTube comments. So if you are listening to the podcast on YouTube, then do feel free to drop a comment below the video with your player ratings, where you rate the players' performances from 1 to 10. Now, of course, that's with 10 being the best. Now, the main reason I want you to do that and obviously share your opinion is just so that I can compare how you thought the players performed to how I thought they performed, and basically so we can have a little bit of a discussion about it. So if you are someone who maybe disagrees with me, might have given a player maybe a different rating, or maybe there's something you think I've missed in terms of their performance, of course feel free to comment that below as well. And once again, it just gives me that chance to actually compare how you thought the players performed. But also, even if you don't want to do that, comment below with your general views of the game, because if you're looking at a Palace perspective, we've basically been absolutely abysmal at home this season. Only scored 14 goals, yet on the final home game of the season, the final game of the season, we end up scoring 5 goals. So for our perspective, it's been great, because we've been terrible at home all season, but we finally got the reward right at the end. But obviously in a Bournemouth perspective, conceding 5 goals away from home isn't great. And certainly if you're looking at some of the goals, it was just simple stuff from them actually being sort of caught out on the counter. So as long as, as well as, commenting with your player ratings, feel free to comment below with your any views really of the game. If an individual moment in the game sticks out for you, feel free to comment that below. If a player's performance stuck out for you, also feel free to share that below. And like I've said already, it's mainly so that I can read through and see what you guys thought and compare it to my own opinion, but it's also so that any other fans who find themselves on the channel, whether they be Palace or Bournemouth fans, rather than just listening to me talk about the game, they can of course head to the comment section, just once again building up a bigger opinion of the game. And if you do have any questions for me, anything you disagree with me, of course feel free to also comment that below, because I do like to have discussions in the comment section with you guys. So once again, if you do want to have your opinion heard, obviously feel free to leave comments in the comment section below. Now, if you do want to follow any of the social media pages that I've mentioned, or join our Facebook group, then do check all links that will be in the description below. But I'm now going to move on to my player ratings, starting to go with Vicente Gaeta, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. So once again, I've talked quite a lot recently in the fact that Gaeta has been one of our most consistent performers in the last few weeks or so, and actually he's been really crucial to us picking up points here and there, and that's just down to the fact that he was making saves and he was just having an overall solid performance. And I've given him a 6 here because in any game where a goalkeeper concedes 3 goals, even though it may not necessarily be his fault, you've got to put a little bit of blame there. But aside from that, I think he had a very good game. Maybe not as good as some of his games have been in previous weeks, but I do think the 6 overall is a fair reflection. Now, one of the things that did really impressed me is obviously how quickly Palace started the game in terms of how we got into it. But the few chances that Bournemouth had quite early on, I think Gaeta done a great job in terms of making these early saves. And, considering we were the dominant team at that point, Bournemouth quite easily could have hit us on the counter-attack that they did and scored from it. So the fact that Gaeta was able to deal with them few attacks going forward from Bournemouth was of course great to see. And there were a number of high balls as well seen by Bournemouth quite early on in the game, and I think Gaeta relatively well actually was able to deal with them. Now of course maybe he wasn't convincing with them, he's been quite convincing in terms of claiming balls this season or punching them away, and maybe he wasn't so much so. You're looking back at this game, maybe he wasn't so much or so good, let's say, dealing with the high ball in this game here against Bournemouth, but at least he got the job done, and that's what you want to see from him. And that's why I've given him a 6 as opposed to a 7 in recent weeks. It's just the fact that there was nothing really spectacular about his performance. He just made a couple of good early saves and of course dealt with the high balls when they were put in the area. Now, of course, if you're looking at the whole of that first half, bar them early saves he had to make, he was actually quite underused and he had a really quiet game, and that was mainly down to Palace playing well, having most of the possession, and basically Gaeta wasn't really tested. But of course, bar the couple of crosses he had to claim, there wasn't really much he had to do. Now, of course, I've talked already, we conceded 3 goals. Obviously, there's nothing really he could do about Lerma's first shot, Jefferson Lerma's fantastic strike right into the top corner. And if you look at actually the picture, Gaeta, obviously you can see it's going into the corner and he's obviously dived and jumped in that direction. But the shot is so good from Lerma, it's gone right in the top bins. I don't think any goalkeeper's saving that. So realistically, yes, he was denied a clean sheet, but it was from a great goal. And you've got to give credit to Lerma there, because it was an absolute thunderbolt. And of course, the most disappointing thing is that we've done so well up until that point. 44 minutes into the game, almost going in for half time, and we concede right at the death. But because I suppose we had that 3-goal advantage, which of course turned to a 2-goal advantage, the fact that we were just ahead in the game sort of meant that didn't really hurt us, didn't really change the way we approached the second half. But nevertheless, a real thunderbolt scored just before half time could have completely changed the game, but realistically didn't, in terms of Bournemouth actually getting a foothold back in the game. Now, like I said already, couldn't really do much about that goal, and I suppose looking at the second goal as well, obviously scored by Jordon, took a little bit of a deflection right into the bottom corner, but that touch on the edge of the area to get it in, and once again right in that bottom corner. Yes, Gaeta sort of dived, and maybe you could argue should have done better, but I just think the fact that it took a slight deflection, I believe it was off Joe Wood, obviously made it a little bit more difficult for Gaeta. So I'm not really going to blame him for the first goal, obviously, because it's a wonder strike. Jordon one, slight deflection, still dived down, but quite unlucky there. And of course, King's tapping, I don't really think he could really be faulted for that. That's just down to defenders in and around the box losing their markers at the corner, and the ball was quite an easy tap in there. So realistically, the 3 goals we conceded, yes, it might look bad on paper, but actually I don't think Gaeta had anything realistically to do with that. And I suppose when you're looking at the second half in particular, he was very quiet in that first half, but of course in the second half he was obviously beaten twice, but I don't think any blame whatsoever can be put on his shoulders, and that's why I've given him a 6 overall, because he done what he had to do, particularly early on in the half, in first half, making these early saves, dealing with the high balls. But obviously the 3 goals we conceded, nothing really he could do about that. But maybe you could argue, especially the second one, maybe if he'd got down lower or his position had been a little bit better, maybe he could have dealt with it. But I do think overall for Vicente Gaeta, a very strong end to the season. And obviously when you consider the occasion with Speroni, we wanted him to at least be on the bench. He wasn't, and of course he's obviously leaving Palace now, but the Gaeta I think is a good enough replacement, well, more than good enough replacement, because what he's shown in recent weeks is the sure quality he's got, and hopefully that transition from a club legend leaving, hopefully Gaeta can actually make that place his own now, and maybe we'll see him for the next few seasons or so. But once again, strong end to the season for Vicente Gaeta, and certainly deserving of the 6 I've given him. So now I'm going to move on to the first player in our defence, and that is the right back Aaron Wan-Bissaka, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now, to be honest, I've talked quite a lot about Wan-Bissaka this season, and actually as the season's gone on, we've started to see parts of his game develop, and this game was really just sort of epitomised his season in the fact that defensively he was solid, and actually offensively as well we started to see some good bits in his play, and that's really why I've given him a 7 overall. Now, obviously we've seen many times this season, Wan-Bissaka's had to deal with individual players well, and particularly against top 6 clubs, he's dealt with people like Eden Hazard, people like Leroy Sané, he's dealt with these really well. And actually, Ryan Fraser, yes, he's not in the top 6 side, but certainly this season he's been a fantastic player for Bournemouth, and Wan-Bissaka's job, and he was tasked with actually dealing with him, and I do think he actually was up against him and done a relatively good job. And the reason, or the reason you could see he was doing such a good job, is actually he pushed him back so far that actually Fraser wasn't really involved in that first half in particular. And of course, when you consider that he pushed him back so far, obviously meant sort of, well, the way I look at it is that because he pushed him so far back and, you know, was able to control him, it obviously gave Wan-Bissaka that freedom to go slightly further forward. And the fact that throughout that first half he dealt with Ryan Fraser really well, but when he got forward he provided the fantastic assist, which of course was for Palace's second goal, which of course was also Michy Batshuayi's second goal. So I've talked quite a lot this season, you know, about, you know, Wan-Bissaka's defensive work, but it was nice to see in this game that yes, he done his defensive work, but he was so many times, I lost count, he was getting up that right hand flank. And obviously for that occasion, for the assist for Batshuayi's goal, fantastic little run, and obviously a great sort of fizz ball right into the box, really low, so obviously it was difficult for defenders to deal with. You know, literally a pinpoint cross of Batshuayi to put home for his second goal, and also Palace's second goal. So whilst he was good defensively, in particular dealing with Fraser, I do think that assist really does epitomise that yes, he may not be the best sort of right back in terms of his offensive work, but that sort of showed glimpses of his previous self when, of course, in the academy teams he used to play as a winger. So it'd be really nice, you know, going into next season now, touch wood he stays at Palace, that actually, yes, he can continue defending well like he's done so many times this season, but actually if he can continue to add assists like that into his game, it of course will be great to see. And I suppose you're looking at the game as a whole, obviously I've talked mainly about the first half there, but looking at the game as a whole, I can't really recall him actually putting a foot wrong. Maybe for the third goal that we conceded, maybe he could have done better there, because of course he lost his marker at the corner, and arguably yes, he probably should have done better there. But on a day where actually his overall defensive work, so in not from set piece situations, his defending was excellent in them situations, was of course really great to see. And I suppose, like I said already, Ryan Fraser's been absolutely fantastic for Bournemouth this season. And, you know, the fact that Wan-Bissaka actually got on top of that challenge, that Jewel was able to deal with him really well, as well as the fact that he actually, you know, was able to limit his chances, because of course it's alright, you know, defending against players, making tackles, making challenges, trying to win the ball back, but if you completely restrict them before you actually even have to make a challenge, you know, you just close them down, or you make it difficult for them to actually get into your own half, just little things like that is something that really did impress me. And, you know, like I've said, you know, I think it really epitomises Wan-Bissaka's season, the fact that he was able to deal with a player individually so well, but also he was contributing in an attacking sense. And I suppose just going back to that attacking work, obviously you could argue that maybe Bournemouth should have done better, shouldn't have been leaving all that space there, but the fact that Wan-Bissaka as a fullback has seen that space down that right hand side, acres of space there for him to run into, he ran into them, was very sure what he was going to do, you know, cross the ball in, and the fact that that was very accurate was great to see as well. And, you know, it's been fantastic this season to see how he's developed, because we obviously saw the end of last season, you know, this guy's a talent, you know, let's see what he can do in a full season. And the fact that, you know, he's played nearly almost every game this season, bar a few where he's missed with injuries, the fact that he's been able to maintain his high level of performance really goes to show the quality that this guy's got, but also the potential as well, because the only way is up for him, because he keeps improving week in, week out, and particularly with that attacking part of his play, he's only going to get better. And I suppose this performance here sort of really summed up his season, where yes, he was good defensively, dealt with individual players well, but actually going forward and providing that fantastic assist for Palace's second goal from Batshuayi was of course also great to see. So once again here, Wan-Bissaka here playing at right back, I do think the 7 is a fair result. So I'm now going to move on to the first centre back in our back four, and that is Martin Kelly, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now I do think, you know, much like I said last week, I think Kelly once again had a very good game here, and when you consider this was yet another game where he was actually playing with sort of in a makeshift back four, in the fact that Joe Ward had come in at centre back because of course the injury to Scott Dan, the fact that yet again Kelly wasn't really playing with one of his normal partners, the fact that he performed so well really goes to show sort of the professionalism of him, but also the quality he's got to actually adapt to different scenarios. And I suppose what you've got to look at this game here, in the fact that yes, he was playing alongside Joe Ward, but he still had to have that constant communication to make sure that even though sort of it's a makeshift back four, it can still work. And I think one of the reasons, well, me looking at the game, one of the reasons why we done so well defensively, aside from the 3 goals we conceded, and I suppose it's a bit weird saying we defended well when we lost. When we obviously scored conceded 3 goals. Obviously didn't lose the game, we won 5-3, but you've got to look at the defence and sometimes you criticise them. But actually, the fact that Martin Kelly had that constant communication with Joe Ward, making sure he was comfortable at centre-back, was of course great to see in terms of, taking responsibility. But also it led to us defending well against sort of Bournemouth, particularly when they tried to hit us on the counter-attack. So of course, that was great to see. Now, much like any player, obviously I've said already, it's not great conceding 3 goals, particularly at home. But, he won't be happy at that, neither will any player in the team, even if it was sort of the makeshift back four, and even though it wasn't necessarily particularly his fault, because the first goal, fantastic strike, probably Bournemouth's goal of the season, can't really do anything about that. You're looking at the second goal, took a little bit of a deflection off Joe Ward, wasn't really Kelly's fault, and of course the final goal, probably Wan-Bissaka's going to be that one player in particular at fault for that. So realistically, Martin Kelly won't be happy in terms of the defensive work at conceding 3 goals, but in terms of his individual performance, I think we've got to give him credit, and I do think for that reason he obviously deserves the 6 I've given him. Now I suppose, you've got to look at Joe Ward as well, and probably maybe blame Martin Kelly for the third. I don't really want to say that, but I've seen a few people pick it out, so I thought I'd mention it anyway. I personally don't think he's really at fault for that goal, that third goal, mainly down to Wan-Bissaka losing his man, but nevertheless, maybe Martin Kelly could have done a little bit better there. But I suppose what you've got to look at is that, and what you've got to understand is that last game of the season, both teams are, even though we scored 5 goals, you say we were a little bit on the beach in the fact that both teams didn't really care about defending, they were all about attack, and that's why it was such a high scoring game. But you've also got to look at it and go, he's playing with a makeshift centre-back partner, and actually, you've got to look at it, and on reflection, I would say that Martin Kelly looks a little bit more settled with Dan next to him, and that's quite understandable, because you've got 2 naturally positioned centre-backs playing at centre-back, as opposed to a right-back who's recently played left-back, who's now playing centre-back. So you can understand maybe Martin Kelly not being as great as he has been recently, because he's obviously not as settled, because he's not playing alongside Dan. But like I've said, the reason I've given him a 6 is just because of that communication he had with Joe Ward, the fact that he defended well throughout, and the fact that even though it was a makeshift back four, he done a relatively good job in terms of restricting the opposition in Bournemouth. So once again here, Martin Kelly, solid performance from him, and what has been a very good season for him in terms of establishing himself in that centre-back role, albeit not always first choice, but certainly as the third choice centre-back, done a great job this season. So I'm now going to move on to the second centre-back, and that is of course Joe Ward, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now I suppose you've got to look at Martin Kelly's performance and actually compare it quite a lot to Joe Ward, because I do think on the whole part, aside from conceding 3 goals, I think we've done an alright job defensively, and certainly the fact that Bournemouth have been quite attacking and they've been playing quite a free-flowing football, particularly with King and Wilson playing up top. The fact that we were able to deal with them as well as just restrict them on the counter-attack, and I suppose someone like Fraser as well, was of course great to see. Now, in terms of Joe Ward's performance, the thing that makes it even more impressive is the fact that he was playing in a very unfamiliar position at centre-back, and that's because, of course, Scott Dann was ruled out because of an injury. Now, we've seen Joe Ward play at centre-back, I think it was in the League Cup, so it's not like he was totally new to that position, but much like when he played left-back a few weeks ago, that's somewhere he hasn't really played that much. The fact that that was the case yet again here with him playing at centre-back, but he was still able to adapt to it relatively well, was of course great to see. And I suppose for me, obviously we've had quite a lot of defensive injuries towards the end of the season. We've lost our first choice, our second choice, and of course our fourth choice centre-backs over the course of the last few months or so. So the fact that we've got someone like Joe Ward who can play there sort of begs the question whether he could be an option there next season. You're not going to play him there as your starting centre-back, but it's nice to know that we've got both Martin Kelly and Joe Ward who can play at both at full-back and also at centre-back. So I suppose, when you consider Joe Ward hasn't played there much this season, the fact that he was able to, like I've said, actually adapt to it so well and play as well as he did was of course credit to him. Now, one player in particular he obviously had to deal with was of course Callum Wilson, and sort of in the opening period of the game when Bournemouth were trying to get into the game, I think Joe Ward done a great job in terms of closing him down and not really giving him that much space, and that's really what it was down to, because obviously, yes, he might not be the best centre-back, but the fact that he's got that ability, from playing at right back, playing at left back, to actually have that awareness to close players down really seemed to be quite beneficial, because yes, he may not be the best centre-back, but just having that awareness, that spatial awareness of closing Callum Wilson down, not giving him space on the ball, that was something that I thought was quite beneficial to the way Palace played, because of course, as we know, Callum Wilson is a great threat, and if we'd given him more space, then maybe he could have punished us even further. Now, like I said with Martin Kelly, obviously we conceded 3 goals, which normally you'd blame the defence for that, but actually, you know, you've got to put some blame on them, particularly for that 3rd goal. But then on the other hand, you know, the first goal was a great goal, and obviously the other one took a deflection. And I suppose today's probably one of the only days where, yesterday's probably one of the only days where you actually look at a game and go, yes, we won 5-3, but we're not really going to blame the defence for the goals, because, like I said, there are a few questions which could be asked about the 3rd, but the 1st and 2nd, you know, maybe could have done better. Now, of course, in terms of that 2nd goal, talking about that, it did deflect off Joe Ward, obviously Ibe's effort, so you could argue that's sort of his sort of fullback self coming out there. The fact that normally a centre-back would put their body in behind it, whereas maybe, you know, looking back at the replay, Joe Ward went in at a little bit different angle, went sort of a different way, as opposed to what a centre-back would do. And, you know, me looking at that thinking, you know, that's why it took a deflection there, because he wasn't really sure how to approach the ball. But nevertheless, we still went on to win the game, and that was just sort of an unlucky goal to concede in that respect. In the fact that he was able to get the effort away, it deflected, and then it sort of sneaked in at that bottom post. But of course, at that point, it made it 3-2, so it was a bit nervy. But of course, the attacking players obviously were able to finish the game off, get it to 4-2, and of course, after that, eventually get it to 5-3 as well. So I suppose what you've got to look at is the positives from it, and the fact that other players in and around the team, so the attacking players, were able to make up for some of these little defensive mistakes, or the fact that we conceded some good goals from Bournemouth. Now, of course, looking at the final goal, obviously you're looking at the 2nd goal, obviously it deflected off Joe Ward. The other goal, obviously I've talked about Wan-Bissaka already, you know, maybe he should have done better from the corner, but also Joe Ward as well. Obviously, being as a centre-back, you need to impose yourself, making sure you're marking the biggest man. So the fact that he lost at that corner, lost obviously the header from the centre-back, Chris Mapip, I think his name is. The fact that Joe Ward missed him, he was able to head the ball down, and King was obviously able to strike it home. That was a little bit disappointing, but like I said, for me personally, it showed his fullback self, in the fact that normally you wouldn't be marking the big men at corners, and that would be left to the centre-back. So obviously we've got to give him a little bit of blame there, because it's quite simple to actually just make sure you're tracking your man, so it's not so easy to score. But then on the other side, you've got to look at it and go, he's not really a centre-back, and this is his first game, so he's still sort of adapting to it. But whatever you think, I think he had a relatively good performance, and considering, like I said, it was a makeshift back four, you know, he hasn't played much at centre back this season, the fact that he played as well as he did is of course credit to him. So once again here, Joe Ward playing as centre back, I do think the 6 is a fair result. So I'm now going to move on to the final player in our back four, and that is the left back Puncheon Van Aanholt, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now, of course, much like what I sort of talked about with Joe Ward, obviously recently playing at left back, obviously him going to centre back obviously meant that Puncheon Van Aanholt was actually recalled to the side, and the fact that I've given him a 7 actually shows how good his reaction was, in terms of he was dropped for a few games, and actually coming back into the side, he obviously had that positive reaction and was able to put in a good performance. Now, of course, you know, he missed the Arsenal game, he missed the game last weekend, and of course he played the game in between, so he's sort of been in and out, hasn't been completely sort of thrust out the side, but I just think he needed that break, and as we saw with this game here, in terms of the goal he scored and sort of that attacking contribution he made, it seemed to make all the difference. Now, like I've said already, you know, well, I suppose we played quite dominant when we started the game, and that was mainly down to people like Townsend, Zaha, Batshuayi, all sort of getting involved in an attacking sense. And actually Van Aanholt was one of the quieter players quite early on in the game, because whilst the rest of the team had a really great start, we were dominating possession, you know, Van Aanholt wasn't really convincing in terms of, you know, his attacking contribution, and certainly defensively as well. I think you've got to look at it and go, Jordon Ibe, quite early on in the game when Bournemouth were on a counter-attack, he found it quite easy to get past Van Aanholt, but you know, like I've said, once he got into the game and once he sort of got back to his old self, that sort of happened less and less, and he slowly grew into the game. Now, the main thing for me, and the main thing that impressed me, and hence why I've given him a 7, is that so many times this season I've said, we know he's got the quality going forward, but he's not showing it. Whereas in this game here, he showed his quality going forward in terms of, you know, getting into good positions, doing 1-2s with teammates, but the thing that made it even better is the fact that he got on the score sheet, and that was once again him going forward, doing a 1-2 with Zaha, enabled him to make a run into the box, and of course he scored past the goalkeeper, and obviously it was great for him to celebrate in the homestyle. But that sort of goal really epitomises what we know he can do, because we know he can make runs down that flank, and whether he puts balls into the box or he's on the end of a ball from a 1-2, we know he's got quality in the box, and obviously it's been a bit disappointing that we haven't really been able to see it this season. And I suppose looking at this game here, last game of the season, he always seems to score for Palace last game of the season, so of course it was nice for him to do so. Now, obviously looking back at the goal, it was a really well taken goal. Obviously the 1-2, or the run from Zaha and him to get into that good position, that 1-2, you know, the fact that Zaha threaded the ball through to him and he was able to time his run perfectly and get the ball under the goalkeeper was really, really good. But, you know, I suppose what you've got to look at this season, and this is why people have been disappointed with him, is the fact that we know his forward play is good, and we haven't really questioned that. We just question the fact that he isn't really able to produce it consistently. So it'd be nice to see him actually put in performances like the one here, where he was good offensively and defensively going into next season, because certainly we know the quality's there. We just haven't seen it enough this season. But then when we have seen it, it's been very good. So he just needs to get that balance sort of in between. Now, of course, going back to the 3 goals we conceded, arguably maybe he could have done more with that second goal. Obviously he was the guy in front of the post with Gaeta, maybe sort of rather than him sort of ball watching and trying to get in the way, maybe he should have at least tried to stick out a leg and just try and block it, as opposed to trying to hope that in his position it was somehow going to hit him. But like I've said already, you know, we won the game 5-3. The goals, you know, one of them was great. Obviously the other ones were quite unlucky. So overall, I don't really going to put too much blame on him there. But the main reason I've given him a 7 was just sort of that revival of his fantastic attacking play, and that was obviously most evident and most brilliantly summed up with the goal he scored, in the fact that he was able to get into a good position and then therefore finish it off afterwards. So once again here, Puncheon and Aanholt, the left back, do think the 7 is a fair result. Hopefully we see more performances like this going into next season. So I'm now going to move on to the first player in our midfield, and that is the captain, Luka Milivojevic, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now, in terms of Luka's performance, I suppose it was sort of a real summary of his season as a whole, in the fact that it was a fairly average performance. You know, he was involved quite a lot in the midfield, done what he had to do, and I do think overall, you know, the 6 really reflects what was an average performance from him. But actually, obviously, his overall game was a little bit disappointing by his standards, but he actually started the game really well, and I talked earlier on about how Palace dominated quite early on. We were looking to get ahead, and certainly Luka was quite key to that, because literally 5 minutes into the game, he's made a drive forward from the midfield, obviously got the ball past him, found himself in the edge of the area, had a shot, and of course it came off the post. So whilst his rest of his game was quite disappointing, it was nice to see him actually be quite lively and actually have that intent, and I suppose have the ability and confidence to actually shoot from the edge of the area. So of course that was nice to see, but also nice to see that it was so early on in the game as well. Now, of course, early into the second half, he obviously got booked for a foul on Wilson, and realistically, that shot he had and that foul which he got booked for from Wilson are really the 2 only things I could really talk about in his performance, because that's exactly what it was, because he'd done what he had to do, and there isn't really too much of note to talk about. And I think that just really sums up, you know, how quiet his game was. But the fact that he started the game brightly, but then after he struck the post, he sort of fizzed out and wasn't really looking to get involved. But nevertheless, just nice to see him actually have that intent so lucky, you know, so early on in the game. Now, of course, this is something that I haven't actually seen many Palace or Bournemouth fans talk about it, but of course he could have been sent off for a second yellow card, and that was for quite a rash challenge on Lerma, and he was already on a yellow card from that foul on Wilson. Now, obviously on another day, maybe that would have been given as a second yellow card, or on another day, you know, that would have been your final warning. But I think on reflection, the referee just wanted to play the game quite nicely, and considering it was his last game in refereeing, he obviously didn't want to send anyone off. And I think if you look back at the highlights, basically he was saying to him, you know, I don't want to send you off, don't do anything silly, and that's certainly what he done there. So realistically, you know, he started the game well, done what he had to do in the midfield, but just that silly booking he got, as well as the fact that he could have been sent off, really sort of summed up why it was quite a lacklustre game from him, really, because I think that is the best word to describe it. Now, the stat I really want to put to you, and this is not about this performance as a whole, but about the whole season. Now, Milivojevic is one of only 3 outfield players to play every single minute of the Premier League season. Obviously, all 38 games, all 90 minutes plus extra time played. And, you know, you've got to put your hands up and say that's a fantastic achievement, because obviously your goalkeepers play the majority of the season, and of course there are a few Premier League goalkeepers who've done that. But the fact that Luca is only, he's one of only 3 players to actually have played every minute of the Premier League this season really is sort of a real credit to him in the fact that he's able to, play consistently well, manage to keep his place in the team, and manage to obviously do well as a captain. But also, you've got to look at the medical staff at Palace and go, it's nice to see actually a player go the whole season without getting injured. So once again here, obviously his performance was a little bit lacklustre, but the positive we're going to take is the fact that he now capped off the season by obviously playing every game. And like I've said, that's one hell of achievement. Not getting any suspensions, not getting any injuries, playing well to keep a place inside. Everything about his season, albeit it hasn't been the greatest season for him, bar scoring penalties, he's still been good in the fact that he's managed to maintain his place and presence on the midfield. So once again here, the captain, Luka Milivojevic, I do think the 6 is a fair result. So I'm now going to move on to James McArthur, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. And, I suppose much like Luka, this was a very standard McArthur performance. Lots of hard work, full of running, getting things ticking over in the midfield. And really that's what we've come to expect from him. But it was nice to see him actually end the season on the high with another good performance. And that's why I've given him a 7 overall. Now, much like Luka, he had a chance quite early on in the game, obviously, to get ahead. I suppose early in the game, it was early in the second half. But still, early into that second half, obviously, had a great chance to him. Obviously, came close to a goal. But, of course, the effort was saved by the goalkeeper, who, by the way, bar conceding 3 goals, actually had a good game because a few of his saves, the one from McArthur, the one from Andros Townsend, were actually quite good. So, obviously, he came close to scoring a goal there early in the second half. But, of course, the effort was saved by the goalkeeper. So once again here, McArthur showing that not only can he do that good midfield work in terms of running all over the place, covering a lot of ground, as well as just keeping things ticking over by winning challenges, driving forward, but also is able to combine that with that sort of attacking work. And quite arguably, he was quite unlucky not to score early in the second half, obviously because of the goalkeeper making a good save. Now obviously going on into that second half, obviously we had that 3-1 lead at that point, and of course they pegged it back and we obviously ended up winning the game 5-3, but I think he was quite instrumental just to keep us ticking over, particularly when the pressure was quite high and the fact that Bournemouth were getting back into the game. And realistically, you've got to look at every performance McArthur has played this season and say it's sort of been a copy and paste, because there's been a few games here and there where he's been a little bit below par, a few where he's been fantastic, but the majority of his games this season have been quite consistent. And the phrase I've used quite a lot, and particularly early on in the season, is consistently average, because that's exactly what he was. He wasn't terrible, wasn't bad, doing what he had to do. And this was a performance, obviously on the better end of that, where he done what he had to do, like every game this season, working hard for the team. And, once again, much like Luka, McArthur's another player who played all 38 games, well, he's played in all 38 games this season. Obviously didn't play every minute, obviously compared to Luka, but it's obviously an achievement, the fact that he's managed to stay the whole season, considering he's had injury problems before, stay the whole season not injured, as well as the fact that he'd been able to, basically play a vast amount of minutes. Because yes, in comparison to Luka, obviously James McArthur's played a few less minutes. Obviously he's come off the bench a few times and been taken off, but nevertheless it's still an achievement to actually play all 38 games in the season. And also you've got to factor in the fact that he played quite a lot in the FA Cup and Carabao Cup as well. So James McArthur here, a great end to the season in the fact that just his hard work in the midfield was really quite important to us, just ticking over. And whilst we obviously lost the game, we conceded. I keep saying lost the game. We conceded 3 goals. Even though that was the case, I don't really think he was involved in that. But on the other hand, we scored 5 goals, and he was not necessarily directly involved in any of the goals we scored. But that sort of presence he had in the midfield, just to get things going, driving forward, getting back and defending. Everything about his game was really great to see. And I suppose, obviously, I've given him a 7 here, but it really epitomises him as a person, him as a player, in the fact that he always works hard for the team, gets things going. And I described him as a bulldog a few weeks ago, because that's exactly what he was. Just carries on, really determined, does what you have to do. So once again, a very impressive performance from McArthur. So I'm now going to move on to the final player in the midfield, and that is Max Meyer, who I'm going to give an 8 overall. Now, of course, I've talked quite a lot about Max Meyer this season, you know, whether he should be starting in our midfield, whether he's good enough, whether he's not sort of living up to the hype that was built around him. And actually, I thought this performance here, he finally got a start, and actually he proved his worth to the side with a fantastic performance, fully deserving of the 8 I've given him. Now, like I've said already, you know, it wasn't really only me who was calling for him to start, because many fans, you know, seeing him coming off the bench, seeing him start a few games here and there, but getting withdrawn quite early on in the game, we've obviously seen the quality he's got. So we finally got our wish to actually see him start a game, and the fact that he was playing with that front four of Zaha, Townsend and Batshuayi obviously seemed to really help him, because playing in that number 10 role really unleashed that real talent he's got, and we certainly did see that in the game. And you know, before the game, obviously we were looking at the prospect going, it's really great to see him playing in that number 10 role, and obviously even before the game had already started, just sort of gave us that excitement ahead of kickoff that actually we could finally see the best out of him, in the fact that he's now playing, or in that game here was playing a little bit more central than out wide. Now obviously you're looking at his first half performance, didn't necessarily see that much of the ball, but when he did have the ball, he was quite effective at actually spraying the ball out wide, looking to drive forward. So in that respect, he was really good in terms of maintaining possession and being that workhorse in the midfield, and that creative spark in the fact that he was able to get things going in the side. Now in comparison, his second half was sort of even better. He sort of took it up a level, and that's just because he saw a lot more of the ball. So obviously it's down to, you know, us having a little bit more possession, teammates getting the ball to him more, or maybe it's just the fact that he had such a good first half, but just up to even more. Whatever it was nice to see him a little bit more involved in terms of possession in that second half. And you know, notable moments, I suppose you put it. Obviously Townsend and McCarthy, you know, there were 2 chances there where actually it was maximised creativity which teed them up. Obviously nothing really came off the back of them, but still the fact that he was able to actually get in behind, find these sort of pockets of space, as well as basically causing problems whenever he was on the ball for Bournemouth, was of course great to see. Now obviously when you're looking at our play and you're looking at all of our attacks, you know, you've got to say at least 90%, maybe 80% of our attacks were counter-attacks, and one of the main reasons for that is of course the pace we have out wide and the ability for someone like Batshuayi to find positions in and around the box. But also I think Max Meyer, you've got to give him credit, because I think he was instrumental to that, because nearly everything we'd done good, particularly in that second half and particularly going forward, was all down to him, and all of our good work mainly came down to him. Now obviously if you're playing slightly further central, obviously you are going to be quite crucial, quite instrumental, because you're the guy down the middle driving forward. But the fact that Meyer done it so effectively and was able to basically show his worth for the side is something that really did impress me. Now alongside that offensive work, you know, teeing up McArthur, teeing up Townsend, you know, being instrumental to us driving forward, I do actually think he was very good at actually defending as well, because of course we've seen for him playing with Xhaka and a number of times this season where he's very good at relieving pressure from deep, so getting deep, making a challenge, driving forward. And the fact that he was able to do that work whilst also, you know, finding that cutting pass, dictating the tempo of the game, maintaining possession, everything about his game was really sort of epitomises sort of that overall midfielder you want, basically the perfect midfielder you would want, you know, working hard both defensively and offensively, being creative, being a workhorse. Everything about his performance is what you would want from a midfielder, and it was really great to see. And you know, I really do hope that next season he does really get a good chance, because we've seen him quite a lot off the bench this season, but based on this performance here and based on just the way we flowed really when we played with him in the attack, just really begs to me, you know, why he hasn't started this season, because he started here. Maybe his arm's been twisted a little bit because of course Jeffrey Slupp was injured, but the you know, it still remains. Max Meyer had a fantastic game here, fully deserving of the 8, mainly down to his attacking play here. But Roy Hodgson, you've got to listen to this, because you know he's been absolutely fantastic this season, certainly in spells here and there. And maybe he wouldn't have played the game if Slupp wasn't injured, but still, the fact that Max Meyer got put into the side because of course Roy Hodgson's hands were sort of twisted a bit was of course great to see, and hopefully we'll see more of Meyer next season. Whether that be in a more central role, whether that be in a more advanced role, number 10, or whether it be in a more defensive role, whatever it is, I really want to see the best of him going forth next season. So once again, Max Meyer here, a great performance where he was able to dictate the play in the midfield and fully deserving of the 8 I've given him. So now I'm going to move on to the first player in our front three, and that is Andros Townsend, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now obviously I've given Townsend here because his overall performance was quite good, but actually what you wouldn't really expect, actually he had a fairly quiet start to the game, and whilst people like Luca, people like Wilf, and obviously you're looking at someone like Batshuayi as well, were obviously raring to go from the start, and you could see from a few of the early chances they had that they were really looking to get ahead in the game. I think Townsend was fairly the opposite in that respect, in the fact that he was very quiet in that first half, particularly in terms of actually getting on the end of chances or, you know, creating chances for his teammates. But in the second half, it was sort of a complete juxtaposition from that first half to the second half. And literally, you know, moments into that half, he obviously produced one of his trademark strikes, but of course it forced a really good save out of the goalkeeper. So whilst in that first half he was very quiet, came out second half, raring to go. Obviously we were already 3-0 ahead, and of course it was a little bit nervy. Maybe Bournemouth could get back into it. So of course he had a go, and you know, literally it's great to see actually he's come out with a positive mindset from that half time, and of course, you know, literally minutes later had a shot which of course brought out a good save from the goalkeeper, who once again, got to mention it, you know, the goalkeeper, even though he's really young, had a really good professional performance overall. Now of course that chance was saved by the goalkeeper, but he more than made up for that with of course getting on the score sheet, which of course was a fantastic run by Wilfried Zaha. But then, and of course I'll talk about that, but likewise it was a good finish from Townsend. Of course the ball from Zaha obviously made it a bit easier for Townsend, but just the angle he was approaching it at and the way he hit it so cleanly into the bottom corner, you know, through the field of players, and of course, you know, away from the goalkeeper as well, was really impressive. So whilst we could talk all day about that run and just that physicality Will showed to stay on his feet and drive forward, you know, you've also got to look at the quality that actually Townsend showed, in the fact that he was able to, you know, get into that right position and then obviously hit it first time into the bottom corner. Yeah, I believe it was first time. So that really just goes to show the quality he's got, and that moved him up to 9 goals for the season, which really goes to show, you know, for someone who hasn't actually got any end product, to end the season, I think it's on 9 goals and 5 assists, really goes to show how much he's developed this season, because obviously previous seasons he's only scored 1 or 2 goals here and there, got a few assists here and there, but it's been good offensively, whereas this season he's taken it to a whole new level where all of his attacking play is good, but also he's adding the goals and an assist to his game. And like I've said, you know, he only scores screamers, he only scores great goals, and this was a classic example once again where he scored a great goal, and it all came down from, obviously it was all made up by Wilf in terms of his hard work, but then on the other side you could look at it and go, actually that finish from Townsend was really great as well. Now obviously after that he had a few other wayward efforts as well, but you know, that's something we haven't really come to expect from him now. Obviously we've seen the great goals he scored this season, so whenever he gets in the ball now, whenever he cuts inside, you're expecting it. But you know, he won the Goal of the Season award because obviously he took a shot from out wide and it went in, so we've come to sort of really expect him now, whenever he gets on the ball, whenever he's at distance, to try and hit them like he did against City. And whilst it didn't come off for him here, other than the goal he obviously scored, which of course didn't come from a long shot but came from a nice curled effort into the bottom corner, you know, like I've said already, the fact that he's been performing so well this season obviously meant that we were probably expecting a little bit more from the few chances he did have. But like I've said, aside from the goal he scored, that chance which forced the goalkeeper into a save was also a very good one. Now of course, you know, like I said with MacArthur and Luca, obviously Townsend was yet another player who's actually played, or he's featured in all 38 games this season, which once again is a fantastic milestone for him. Now of course he's come off the pitch a few times, he's come off the bench a few times, so understandably, like McCarthy, he hasn't played all 90 minutes of them 38 games, but still, like I said, it is some achievement, the fact that he's managed to stay fit, he's managed to stay in the side, managed to avoid injury. So once again, you know, whilst his season's been good in terms of his goals and an assist return, and obviously his general attacking play, the fact that he's sort of been able to keep himself in shape, keep himself relatively on form. Yes, he had a little bit of a dip sort of after Christmas, but relatively he's been given sort of solid 7 out of 10s all season. Really goes to show, you know, how much he's developed this season, in the fact that he's playing a lot more consistent and giving more contributions than he has done previously. So once again here, Andros Townsend, you know, yes, he was fairly quiet in the first half, but I've given him a 7 because his second half performance more than makes up for that. Obviously really early on into that half, forced the goalkeeper into a save. Obviously after that, obviously managed to get the goal which made it 5-3 to Palace. Obviously a really well taken strike obviously after that run from Zaha, and like I've said, a really great way to top off the season, obviously a season in which he played or featured in all 38 games. So I'm now going to move on to the striker in our front three, and that is Michy Batshuayi, who I'm going to give an 8 overall. Now, obviously, Batshuayi, we know how good he's been this season, since coming to Palace, and this was a game where yet again he showed his class. And most of the talk after the game has actually been, yes, obviously Zaha was fantastic, and by far the fact that he was involved in all 5 goals is great. But obviously, lots of people were also talking about Batshuayi and going, could this be his last game for Palace? Going back to Chelsea, will he stay there? Will he come back on loan? Will he go to another club? So actually, there was quite a lot of debate after the game about him. But based on this performance, the fact that I've given him an 8 really just shows how good he is. And we need to do all we can to actually try and get him here next season, because games like this really shows the quality he's got, and shows the fact that we haven't scored many goals at home this season, and then Batshuayi comes in and plays a really fantastic game. If we'd had him all season, we probably would have scored more goals at home. Now, obviously, quite early on in the game, obviously talking about different parts of the game, he obviously was put clean through really early on into the game. Obviously, a great pass through into him, but obviously his shot was straight at the goalkeeper, albeit the flag was raised for offside anyway. But early on in the game, once again, like Luka, nice to see he actually had that attacking intent so early on in the game. And of course, the fact that he made amends for that miss, and the fact that he was offside by obviously scoring the first goal, which was fantastic. Great acrobatics to obviously break the deadlock there, because up until that point it was 0-0, and of course, even though we were the better team, we just thought, maybe Bournemouth might nick one on the counter-attack, because plucky Bournemouth, they always seem to do that. But it was nice to see us score a fantastic goal there. Now, obviously, it mainly started with Zaha and Townsend, and doing a little bit of work down that right-hand side. And obviously, Zaha's tried to cross the ball into the box. It's taken a massive deflection, looped up in the air. And of course, Batshuayi, sort of centre of goal, just sort of in front of the penalty spot, managed to sort of scissor kick it into the goal, away from the goalkeeper, into the net, makes it 1-0. So obviously there are loads of different things about that goal which was great. Obviously the fact that, even though it won't count as an assist for Zaha, but the fact that he still put the ball into the box in such a way that it forced the defender to take that deflection, which put it in such an awkward position, that was obviously good. But the sort of the positional play for Batshuayi to get into that area, the timing of his scissor kick, the way he was able to position himself, so when he takes the scissor kick it goes into the far corner, everything about the goal, the build up, the assist, the actual goal and hit itself, everything about that game was great. And when you consider earlier on in the game, before that, he obviously missed a chance which was fairly easy, 1-on-1. Obviously the fact that he made amends for that was really great to see. Now, of course, he hadn't scored before this game at Selhurst Park this season. Obviously, all of his goals had been away from home. So actually, he waited so long to get a goal at Selhurst, but then, much like London buses, 2 came at once. And that was exactly what happened, because moments after that, obviously, I think it was like 38 minutes or so into the game, obviously, Wan-Bissaka made a fantastic run onto the edge of the area, putting a fantastic cross, and of course Batshuayi was there just to prod it home to make it 2-0 to Palace. And looking at that point, going, Palace, we've got 2-goal lead, we're only sort of half an hour or 40 minutes into the game, so we're thinking, this is really good. And it really did sort of show our domination in the fact that we were able to score goals, and the fact that someone who hasn't scored at home since playing for Palace, the fact that he scored 2 goals at home in one game really just goes to show how well the whole team was playing overall. And it was really nice to see. Obviously the first goal was great because of the scissor kick, but then likewise the second goal, it's obviously not as good as that one, but I suppose when you're looking at it, especially on the replays, just that skill to get into a position and make sure he could time his run so he falls onto the end of Wan-Bissaka's cross was of course great to see. Now obviously Batshuayi's performance was sort of the opposite to Townsend, where his first half he was absolutely electric, and yes, he may have faded a little bit in the second half, whereas Townsend sort of came to life in the second half, but the fact that he still turned up with an all-round good performance, the goals he scored, his contribution in terms of the hold-up play, link-up play, all things like this is something which was really great to see. And I've said already, this probably could be his farewell appearance. Could we get him back on loan this season? Could we actually buy him? I doubt it, given the finances, but is that a possibility there? Because performances like this show how crucial he can be to the side. The fact that he can score goals like that, the fact that he can get into these positions, the fact that the goals he scored are of good quality, the contribution he makes offensively, everything about his game is really great to see. And yes, he may have faded in the second half, but I've given him an 8 because of just how important he was, particularly in getting the goals, but also just overall in our sort of attacking dominance in that first half. And like I said already, it would be fantastic. I don't really care if we don't get him on a permanent, just get him back here next season. Get him on a loan, do what we have to do, because I'd love to see him here next season. Now, like I've said already, just to sort of summarise, obviously I've given him an 8 overall, obviously because he took the opening goal fantastically well, and of course the second goal, yes, maybe you could argue he couldn't miss because it was only from a few yards out, but like I've said already, getting into that position in the first place is the part of his game that I was really impressed with. Now, in terms of his movement, this is something which people have criticised him for, and why they said Benteke is better at movement, but he doesn't always score the goals, whereas Batshuayi may not have all the moments, but he's a good goal scorer. He can score goals, and I actually think in terms of movement across, in terms of movement, I think that's something that he done quite well in terms of moving across the back four, and that obviously meant that rather than us going a bit more direct, we were just looking to attack Bournemouth from different angles, and I think that really played a part in not only his performance and him playing well, but also the whole team as a whole. The fact that he offered a little bit more in terms of the movement in comparison to previous performances, just allowed us to play a little bit more different, and that obviously in turn allowed us to break down Bournemouth even easier. But like I've said already, not really much more I can say. Fully deserving of the 8 I've given him, obviously for the 2 goals he scored. His overall contribution, even though he faded a little bit in the second half, but just that overall offensive performance was obviously great to see. And the fact that he had something that I've criticised him for this season in terms of not having enough movement and just being, just sort of being that poacher who can score goals for us. It was obviously nice to see him actually add a bit more of that movement to his game. So once again here, the Belgian striker, touchwood, hopefully comes back to Palace on a loan or a permanent next season. I do think he's deserving of the 8 I've given him. So I'm now going to move on to the final player in our starting 11, and that is Wilfried Zaha, who I'm going to give a 9 overall. Now, to be honest, what can I say about this guy? This guy is absolutely phenomenal, and it really goes to show, how valuable he is to us. The fact that, yes, people may call us a one-man team, but that performance at the weekend was absolutely phenomenal. In terms of, obviously, before I go on to talk about individual parts of the game, when you've got a player who's obviously won't get the assist for it, but was involved in all 5 of the goals we scored, really just goes to show how on the money Zaha was in this game. Now, obviously, like many fans this season, he obviously was booed by the opposition fans, but as we've seen so many times this season, bar sort of the Brighton game, it came back to bite them, because Zaha seems to sort of relish getting booed on, and it seemed to sort of get him rifled up. And certainly with the goal, when they said he's going to dive in a minute, he's going to cry in a minute, the fact that a few moments later he ends up running a length of the pitch, passing the ball to Townsend and scoring, really just goes to show the quality this guy's got. Because of course throughout the whole game he was being booed, but that moment in particular where he just got into a little scuffle, and then literally 30 seconds later he was in Bournemouth's half and assisted to Townsend to score, really just goes to show how good this guy was. Now, obviously, we would always expect him to be heavily involved, and that's something, obviously, we know from Wolf now, but the fact that he done it so effectively, and the fact that he was so good at actually, I suppose, just making the opposition fear him by just running at them and creating chances, is something which we haven't actually seen a lot from him this season, because whilst he's had good performances here and there, by his standards, even though his goals return is better than previous seasons, his overall performance, certainly in the middle of the season, wasn't that great. So the fact that he's just come out with an absolutely world-class performance here was obviously great to see. Great to see here. And in terms of us actually going forward, I think he played a crucial part in that. And obviously that's a bit obvious, but the fact that you've got to look at one movement in particular. That was obviously for Batshuayi's second goal. It was Zaha who obviously released the ball to Wan-Bissaka, who of course went through to square it to Batshuayi. So not only was Zaha involved in terms of getting the assist, well, it's not going to count as an assist, but he put the ball into the box for the first goal. The second goal, he was the guy who obviously took up a few plays, delayed releasing the ball, and then was able to slip it into Wan-Bissaka. That was something which really was quite impressive, and it just showing he's now adding little bits, little different things to his game. The first goal, it was obviously the cross which forced the goalkeeper, the defender, to take a deflection. Obviously, looking at the second goal, it was Zaha actually, rather than crossing the ball, he's looked for Wan-Bissaka, timed his run perfectly on the overlap. So different parts of his game in terms of that attacking sense was of course great to see. Now, of course, the own goal to make it 3-0, I don't know if he's got the assist for that because it was an own goal, but still, if you play fantasy football, I believe it was. But once again, that came from Zaha making a fantastic run down that left-hand side. Obviously, we passed the ball out quite nicely around the back. Obviously, the ball came to Luca, passed it to Wilf, back to Luca. Obviously, Zaha's made a run forward, and Luca sort of slipped it in behind. I believe it was Luca, if I remember rightly. He slipped it through. Zaha's made a fantastic run. You're looking at maybe 40 yards. of course, tried to shoot. The goalkeeper tried to get under it. He obviously got down low, made the save, but as he's done that, he's deflected it into the path of Jack Simpson, and of course it's just deflected off his shin and gone in. Now, of course, that's quite unlucky for him because, of course, Zaha's take the shot is deflected off the goalkeeper and onto the defender's shins. But then on the other hand, if the goalkeeper hadn't have made that save, it probably would have gone under him anyway and scored. So, you've got to give Zaha a lot of credit there. Obviously for the run he made, but also just that pace and determination he showed to actually break through the midfield, drive forward, and then actually having that confidence to take a shot from there was, of course, great to see as well. And if you're looking at that, in terms of our dominance, it was great to see us actually at that point in the game go 3-0 up. So it's not just about the quality of his run to actually get forward, but actually the context of it, the fact that 2-goal lead is nice, but just to give us that little bit more, even bigger edge, it was nice to see us actually be able to get there. And obviously we know he can make runs, but that run was just fantastic in the fact that he basically ran half the length of the pitch. Then obviously the rebound, his shot, which rebounded, obviously caused the goalkeeper to make a mistake. And of course, if we're looking at the Van Aanholt's goal, he obviously got the assist for that. And once again, lovely 1-2 with Van Aanholt. Van Aanholt's passed the ball to him. Zaha sort of held the ball up, timed it run, and released it just right for Van Aanholt to actually go through and score a goal. So there's so many opportunities and chances I could talk about with Zaha. But the fact that he was involved in himself, like that run he made to cause the own goal, but also he was holding up the ball well, and releasing it to let people like Townsend, like Wan-Bissaka, like Van Aanholt actually go through on goal was, of course, great to see. And of course, Van Aanholt's goal made it 4-2 to Palace. And then, of course, he had another assist for Townsend once again. Like I said, the Bournemouth fans were booing him because he got in a little bit of a scuffle. Literally, we picked ourselves up, passed the ball to him, he made that 40-yard run, and of course, lovely sort of lofted ball into Townsend for him to go forth and score to make it 5-3. So numerous chances Zaha was involved in, and the fact that he was involved in all 5 goals tells you all you need to know about his performance and why I've given him a 9. Now, of course, there's going to be lots of speculation, certainly with performances like this, whether this will be Palace's last game, Zaha's last game for Palace, whether, he'll leave us in the summer. I personally, I'm sort of 50-50 about it at the minute. I don't know if he might leave. I think if there's offers right, he might leave. It might be sort of, his head might be turned, but then on the other hand, the offer has to be right for Palace. So we're looking at maybe £70 million. Now, of course, that begs the question: if he does leave, will he be regarded as one of Palace's greatest ever players? And for me, he's got to be, because yes, of course, you've got people like Ian Wright, Mark Bright, you've got all people like this. You've got Jim Cannon, you've got all these other legends. They were fantastic for Palace. Obviously Julian Speroni as well, who of course said his farewells on Sunday. But you've got to consider Zaha in that bracket, not because of the goals, because he hasn't scored as many goals, let's say, in comparison to people like Wright and Bright, but just his sheer contribution offensively, that attacking, or that sort of creativity he brings to the side, is something which he's got to be considered as one of our greatest ever players, and certainly could go on to do even greater things. And you've possibly got to put him in that bracket with one of our greatest players, just because of the sheer quality, the skill, the pace, everything about his game is great to see. And I suppose, obviously that's all great to see, but I think his strike, or his assist for Townsend in particular, really sort of epitomises everything about him, in the fact that he likes getting the ball, from the midfield, driving forward, and then if he can't take on the defenders himself, just put the ball into the box. And that really sort of epitomised his performance, in the fact that he made a very nice direct run after being booed, after being criticised. Everyone was all sort of around him, got past 2 players, then obviously went through and scored. And like I've said, the jeering from the opposition, the booing, the sort of the tugging from Bournemouth players, and also the hacking down, really sort of didn't really seem to affect him, because like I said already, he still went through to score. And of course, if you're looking at him, the reason he was able to sort of get above the jeering, the tugging, the hacking down, is just because he has that pace, he has that vision, the skill and the touch. So that's basically, the reason he's able to get past these players, the reason he's able to, create chances like that, is just because of his vision to get in behind, his skill to obviously, be able to create chances out of nothing, as well as just having that touch and pace to obviously bring the ball forward. And, I really do hope he stays next season. Obviously, I don't really think it's likely. I think, like I said, I do think it's 50-50, but I think it's more likely that he leaves than he does stay. But even if he does leave, we've got to cherish moments like this, because yet again it was a fantastic performance from him. And whilst he was only sort of get credited with 2 assists for this game, obviously he'll probably get the pre-assist, as I like to call it, for one of our other goals, so that doesn't really count anyway. But certainly 4 of the goals he could be given credit for, and that really goes to show how well he's playing. And I suppose, once again, going back to that Townsend goal, that sort of 30 seconds in terms of picking up the ball from deep, running past 2 players, then putting it to Townsend, really just sums up how good and how sort of talismanic he's been for Palace this season. But once again, don't want to spend any more time talking about him, because we could be here all day. But once again, Wilfried Zaha here, fully deserving of the 9 I've given him. So I'm going to move briefly on to the 3 substitutions Palace made in the game. Obviously, Bukayo Saka came on for Zaha quite late on in the game. Obviously, Bukayo Saka, a few nice touches here and there. Obviously, brung the ball to the corner flag, which of course got a lot of applause from the home fans. Obviously, just sort of seeing the clock out. Can't really give him a rating for that, because, like I've said, wasn't really on the pitch long enough. But nice to see him come off the bench. Could this be his last appearance for Palace? Obviously, only signed sort of a 6-month deal in January. Don't know, possibly, but once again, nice to see we've actually got a little bit of an option and someone who can actually come off the bench and just give us that bit more energy. And I think the reason Zaha was taken off was, obviously, people have speculated maybe that was his goodbye, but I just think the fact that he obviously was on the yellow card already, could have got into a little bit of a scuffle because he was being booed, because he seemed rifle up. I just think take him off and not risk him getting a second yellow card, which of course would affect him going into next season. Now, of course, the second substitution was Connor Wickham. Once again, can't really give him a rating because he came on quite late on for Batshuayi, but yet again, a few good touches here and there, and just to give us some fresh legs. And of course, Luke Dyer, once again, not going to give him any ratings, but the stat I have to mention, 100% pass completion rate. Now, it doesn't mean much if you don't make that many passes, but still, that obviously he's 20 years old, making his debut for Palace in the last day of the season. Obviously, many clubs do that anyway, but it was just nice to see actually Luke Dyer actually come on, get the recognition he deserves, because he's a talented young player by all accounts. You ask anyone involved with the academy, so it's nice to see him actually come on following his injury hell. Got a few minutes here and there, looked good. May not be quite up to the first team level yet, but showed a few good touches here and there, and certainly his first touch. So hopefully there'll be a chance for Luke Dyer next season, because if you ask people who are involved in the academy, they seem to think that him and a lot of the academy players would probably be staying at Palace sort of in and around the first team, as opposed to being put out sort of on loan. So if that is the case, hopefully there's a chance for Luke Dyer going forth this season. But once again, really great to see another player from the Palace academy actually get a chance in the team. So obviously the 3 substitutions, Bukayo Saka, Connor Wickham, Luke Dyer, can't really give them ratings overall, but the fact that they came on and helped us see the game out, which of course was a fantastic 5-3 victory, was of course great to see. Now, obviously, just to give a small summary of the game, and I am planning to do sort of an end of season review, just talking about everything as a whole, as well as obviously talking about the new kits which were launched at this game here. So I'm planning to do that, so probably as a live stream, so obviously keep an eye out there. But obviously just talking about this game in particular as a whole, I do think this was obviously a successful campaign overall, but I think every player obviously had their hand in winning this last game to obviously make it a successful campaign overall. And whilst we weren't able to make it up to 11th, we still maintained 12th place. Good goal difference, I think it was only -2 or something like that, and as well as actually getting our record points total of 49 points. So everything about this season's been quite good, albeit some parts of it were quite disappointing, and I think every player had their part to play. And the fact that we were able to celebrate a successful season with a really good result made it even better, and the fact that we've done it in our new kit as well was obviously even great to see as well. And obviously the only sad part of it is obviously we said goodbye to 2 Palace legends, who of course in Julian Speroni and Jason Puncheon, who are going on to do newer things. Obviously not sure about Puncheon, he's obviously got a few years left in him, and obviously Julian Speroni, you might expect him to retire, but he still wants to carry on, so good luck to whatever these 2 players do going forward. But looking a little bit more in detail in the game, it was an amazing end to the season, like I've said already, and I suppose the perfect way to sign off a season where we've been terrible at home, only scored 14 goals at home, was to score was to score 5 goals at home, because that's something we've been talking about this season. We've been disappointed with the lack of goals we've been scoring. So it's nice to see actually go home, finish the season on a high by actually scoring 5 goals. And you're looking at the fact that we scored 5 goals and the fact that the opposition also scored 3 goals. It was just great entertainment, great way to end the season, and it was nice to see both sets of fans see goals at home this season, because it's not only Palace who are struggling to score at Selhurst Park this season, many other opposition teams are failing to score, and that's just because it's one of the lowest scoring stadiums in the Premier League this season. But this sort of attacking style of football is what we've been missing this season. This is something we've been enjoying away from home all this season, but we've been lacking at home. So it's nice to see us actually finally sort of turn it around and actually finally play some good attacking football at home this season, which, considering our support we've given the team, it was obviously rightly deserved for us. Now, obviously, like I've said already, I talked quite a lot about Zaha, but special mentions to him. He was absolutely electric, and to be honest, that's what we've come to expect from him. But just the way he done it and the way he was involved in all 5 goals really does sum it up perfectly. And when you consider how well our attacking players play, our attacking trio up top as well as Max Meyer in behind, if we can keep someone like Batshuayi in again, and next season could be something very special. And I know I say that, and many fans say that every season, but just the way that Zaha is, and the fact that if we can keep him as well as Batshuayi, and if we can finally get the best out of Max Meyer, if we can have performances like we did against Bournemouth, next season could possibly be a really good thing. Now, obviously, going back to the season as a whole, I do think finishing 12th is quite fair, considering sort of our average position this season has been sort of between 12th and sort of 15th or so. So it's a fair result overall. And, given our sort of poor first half of the season, I think it was only like 2 or 3 wins in 13 games, something like that, considering that was a little bit disappointing. The fact that in 2019 we've been absolutely fantastic. I think if you're looking at only not 2019, we're something like 3rd, maybe 4th in the league, which just goes to show how good we've been on the turn of the year. It just begs the question why we can't put 2 halves of a season together and have a really, really successful one. But obviously, moving on to congratulations. Obviously, you could talk all day about the players, but you've got to say well done to Roy Hodgson and all his backroom staff, because obviously, whilst this result was good and we've survived another season in the Premier League, they've proved a lot of people wrong this season. And certainly with this game here at home, basically a lot of criticism has been about our attacking play at home, and then we just go out and score as many goals as we did. You've got to give Roy Hodgson credit, because whilst he's been quite annoying and he's been quite stubborn a lot of time this season, you've still got to give him credit, because he got us over the line, got us our record Premier League points total, and realistically that's an improvement of last season. So hopefully going into next season we can improve on that even more. And like I've said, even though Roy has had his critics, the fact that we finished the season really, really well, our highest points total, really goes to show that whilst we can be disappointed with our season because we realistically haven't hit our potential, on the other hand we've done relatively well. And I suppose the last thing really for me to say is that we've got to move on to the transfer window now. And of course that's a bit obvious to say, but if a few players like Zaha are going to leave, if there's going to be changes in terms of players getting released and people like Batshuayi not actually coming back, it's going to be a really, really big summer transfer window for us. And if the rumours are correct that there might be someone potentially taking over and potentially the American share of the club or buying the whole club, obviously there could be lots of changes this summer. And if there is a little bit of money, then we've got to be quite shrewd with it once again. But if there is a massive amount of money, then we've just got to make sure that we can build on the squad we already have, try and keep the majority of it, and just build on this season, because it's been a fantastic season this season. And if we can carry that on to next season, that of course would be great. And like I've said already, we've got a great squad, so hopefully next season they can play to their potential. So now I'm going to move on to my Man of the Match award. But before I do that, I give you my Man of the Match and why I thought the biggest influence on the game. I'm now going to give you the 4 nominations I put forward for the award. Now, when you obviously consider how good the Palace performance was, and of course how the result was even better, I could probably put most of the players up for the Man of the Match shortlist, all because every player had their little bit of a contribution to the fact that we won the game 5-3. So of course I could talk all day about why every player should be put forward for this shortlist, but the 4 players I've gone with are really a reflection of our play across the field. So I've gone with defensive players, midfield players, and of course attacking players. And I do think that sort of really sums up and really covers all areas of our good performance, because like I've said, across the field we were fantastic, and certainly in the offensive positions, the fact that we scored 5 goals at home, which of course is a place we've struggled to do so, was of course great to see. So the 4 players I've gone with Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Max Meyer, Michy Batshuayi and Wilfried Zaha. Now in terms of Wan-Bissaka, like he's done all season, been absolutely fantastic defensively, and for me the reason I put him forward is just because of how well he dealt with Ryan Fraser in particular, because he's a player who's been absolutely superb for Bournemouth this season. So the fact that Wan-Bissaka kept him as quiet as he did, as well as actually pushing up and getting that assist for Michy Batshuayi's goal to make it 2-0 was great to see, because he combined his defensive work by dealing with Fraser, by the fact that he was able to, you know, expose that space that, you know, Bournemouth were leaving down his right hand side, and of course had that chance to get on the assist sheet by of course putting the ball to Batshuayi. So once again, for both his defensive and offensive work is why I've put Wan-Bissaka forward. Obviously in terms of Max Meyer, this guy was basically the architect of the midfield, so a lot of the ball in the second half was obviously looking to get other players involved, looking to drive forward himself, and of course there were chances in particular where he was able to find pockets of space which have caused problems for the opposition. And you know, you've got to look at chances where he was able to find Townsend and MacArthur in particular, you know, as chances where he actually showed his creativity to get others involved. And you know, in terms of all of our good play, you know, whilst our front three of, you know, Townsend, Zaha and Batshuayi was quite crucial to us and how well we played offensively, because they had that pace to go forward, and Batshuayi scored the goals to basically to make up for that. But, well, not make up for, that's the wrong word, but obviously the guys, so Zaha and Townsend were the suppliers, and of course Batshuayi was the guy in that front three obviously scoring the goals. But in terms of Max Meyer, the fact that he was involved in all of our good play going forward, so whilst the front three were important, I think Max Meyer playing in that number 10 role just in behind was just as important, if not better, and that was all just because whenever we were getting forward he was looking to drive forward. He obviously relieved the pressure by actually coming deep and then releasing the ball going forward. He was able to find many cutting passes, and of course he dictated the tempo. So for me, Max Meyer, just the way he controlled the midfield both offensively and defensively, the way he was getting back and defending, as well as just dictating the play with his passing, is why I've put him forward for the award. And of course Michy Batshuayi, obviously if you score 2 goals in the game you're going to be up there as one of the players of the game. But Batshuayi, obviously other than this goal, I think his overall sort of link up play and movement was fantastic in the game, and that just meant that rather than us playing more direct, which we've done this season, just allowed us to play a little bit more free, a little bit more expansive, let's say. So the fact that he played well in terms of his overall play, and obviously combined that with 2 fantastic goals, obviously the first one being a fantastic scissor kick, so good positional awareness there, and of course the second just being a nice sort of diving shot to obviously get on the end of Wan-Bissaka's cross. The fact that he was positioned well in both cases, as well as being able to finish the chances, is obviously why I've put him forth for the award. And of course Wilfried Zaha, you know, what more is there to say about this guy? I gave him a 9. I don't often give that many 9s, which just goes to show how good his performance was. But the fact that he was involved in all 5 goals, quite simply, is why I've put him forward for the award. Obviously the first goal, putting that crossing which deflected, with Batshuayi scored from, obviously releasing Wan-Bissaka, which allowed Wan-Bissaka to assist Batshuayi for the second, obviously causing the player to obviously, and the defender to make a mistake, which obviously deflected off of him and went in for the third goal. Obviously you're looking at the other goal as well, the fourth goal, nice 1-2 with Puncheon and of course the fifth goal, a fantastic 40-yard run and a pass to Townsend for that goal. So the fact that he was involved in all 5 goals is a real credit to him, goes to show how good he was. But just the fact that he also, in terms of just sort of getting over the jeering from the opposition, getting the better of them, getting the better of players trying to tug him, trying to actually hack him down, get him down. The fact that he was able to really, for me, rise above that by using his vision, his skill, his pace, his touch to obviously get him behind and get the better of them was of course great to see. And you know, once again, I said that before, I say it again, if we see we'd love to see performances like this, so hopefully Zaha will be in a Palace shirt next season. But overall, I think there's only one clear winner here, and when you consider you're involved in all 5 goals that Palace scored, I'm going to give it to Wilfried Zaha. So congratulations, Wilf. You don't get a trophy or certificate, you do get my sincere congratulations on what was yet another solid performance from you. And like I said already, touch wood, you're at Palace next season, because performances like this really show the class that you have got. But like I've said already, feel free to comment below with your man of the match, and obviously I think for me Max Meyer came a very close second, and the only reason I didn't give it to Max Meyer is just because of the fact that Zaha was involved in all 5 goals, and arguably on another day he could have had all of the assists for them. Well, he could have had at least 4 assists if they didn't take deflections here and there. So once again, Wilfried Zaha here, a fully deserved man of the match award for him. So now you've heard my match report, player rankings and my man of the match. That concludes this week's podcast. Now I've got interviews with Julian Speroni, Max Meyer and Luke Dreyer following the game.
Well, it's hard to express, how I'm feeling right now. It's as I said, it's been 15 years, and the bond that we built with all the fans here, it's just incredible. And again, I will never forget. It's something that will stay forever.
Equally, the fans here love you for all that you've done for them down the years. What have been your highest points, do you think, your best moments?
Well, it's been a roller coaster, highs and lows, but I think, I take it as a whole. And obviously playing important matches, when everybody remembers, those important games and those important saves. But I think overall, the whole time that I spent at this unbelievable football club, it's just the highlight for me,
Why do you think the fans have taken to you so much? It's been a long time, but they clearly adore you.
It goes both ways. I adore them as well. So I don't know. I can't explain it really. They know, I can have good games, bad games, but every time I step on that pitch, I think I given them everything I had, and I think they always appreciated that. And it's been incredible.
The big question is, what's next?
That's a good question. I don't know yet. I don't know. I want to carry on playing. That's something I would like to do if I can. I feel good. I feel fit. I feel strong. So I think I'll regret if I stop now. So I want to have a break now, think things through, and then make a decision when the right time comes.
You've enjoyed a bit of time out with the family on the pitch, so go and enjoy some time with them now.
Thank you so much for all these 15 years. Thank you.
Max, first of all, the game today, it was a crazy game, wasn't it?
Yeah, really crazy. I think we played very well today, and we scored a lot of goals and good goals, and that's a good finish for the season, and I hope the crowd is happy with us.
And for you, positionally, playing on the left of a 3, do you feel like that was a good position for you today?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I like the position. We had a lot of possession, and that's good for me, and it's fine. It doesn't matter where I play. It's more important that I play because then I'm happy, and today I played, and that's very good for me.
What do you think of the crowd here today afterwards for Julian Speroni?
Yeah, that's unbelievable. Since I signed here for this club, the crowd was always unbelievable when we had the home game, and today it's very special for 2 legends, for Jules and for Puncheon. I think they both deserve it.
And for you, this season, has this season for you been about kind of getting used to English football?
Yeah, it's not the same like the Bundesliga. It's tougher and quicker, but I think it was a good season for me and for the club because I came 1 week before the league started, and it was not that easy. I had 3 months no training with the team, and so I needed pre-season, and I think it was a good season. I did a lot of games, and that's good for me.
And finally, what do you think this team can achieve next season?
I think our target must be finish under the top 10. I think we have a very good quality in this team. When I compare it with my old team in Germany, we have more quality, and I think we can reach it.
Thanks, Matt. Enjoy your holiday.
Thank you.
Luke, congratulations! You finally made your debut. How did you feel?
It's a really proud day for me and my family. It feels like it's been a long time coming, to be honest. And I'm over the moon for the manager to give me the chance. And obviously it's a great day for it to happen, getting the win as well. So I'm just over the moon, really.
And you nearly scored, didn't you?
Yeah, I know. It was literally like time stood still, and I saw the ball coming to me, and I just hesitated a bit, and he got in front of me. But that would have capped it off nicely. But it wasn't to be.
What did he say to you before you came on?
He just said enjoy it. He gave me a few instructions where I needed to be and stuff, but he just said enjoy it, and everyone was telling me when Andros came off just said to enjoy it and stuff. So.
Was there a point in the past couple of years where you thought this might never happen?
Yeah, many points to be honest. I remember in January I come on for the 23s and got injured, and I think I went off in tears, literally just thinking whether it's all going to happen. But so it just makes today a bit sweeter, I think. So it's unbelievable.
And you can enjoy your summer and come back and show me the first team after that.
Yeah, that's the aim. So I'll come back ready and look to kick on from here. It's just a starting point, It's just obviously it's a proud day, but it's just one game, and I need to kick on. Yeah.
Thanks, Luke. Enjoy the crowd.
So there you have it. Now you've heard what Julian Speroni, Max Meyer and Luke Dreyer had to say after the game. That concludes this week's podcast for the game against AFC Bournemouth. Thanks for the support this season, and make sure to come back in the next few weeks and months for my season review and transfer news. All that's left for me to say is remember to up the Palace.